Hello, everyone. This is Karen Woodin from Project Model UN, and I am really excited to introduce you to a friend of mine who is really inspiring to me because he has done something that I've been wanting to do for the past 4 years, and I'm very jealous of him. So, Michael Alexis is a lawyer from Canada who has learned Mandarin. He worked and studied in China, and he's someone who I think you're really going to learn something from because he's taken an unconventional approach to learning and an unconventional approach to his career, which is exactly what we do at Project Model UN. So let me tell you a little bit, some of his accomplishments. So Michael is a very talented writer, and he was able to take this skill and he used it to pay his way through university. He used it to connect with people that he admired, which included top lawyers, it included multi-million dollar business owners. And then he used the skill to also travel to China and just live there and have an amazing life there. So I'm really excited to introduce you to him and have him show you some of what he's learned. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the first question I want to ask you, Michael, is when we were talking about this interview, I told you my students, the people that I serve, they're very talented, very ambitious high school students, sometimes junior high school students. And I think that when we think about someone like you, you're a lawyer, you're in Canada, you're fluent in Mandarin, you lived in China, it's oftentimes intimidating to think about someone like that. We're like, oh my God, that's so far off into the future. So I want to know, what type of high school student were you? Who were you in high school? You were like the nerdy, ambitious kid. Because you told me that you were very internationally minded. Who were you?
Yeah, I don't know that I've changed a lot in the last 15 years or whatever. So here's how I am now and how I remember myself being back then. One, friendly, right? Just friends with every single crowd. High schools are very much, people cliquing off into if you go into the cafeteria, you've got like the table of Chinese guys and then the table of people from the Middle East, and you have the table of skaters, and I don't know what kids are in high school now, but that's it, right? Like cafeterias full of these different tables. I was happy to be friends with all of them.
Okay.
So nerdy, no. Good student, absolutely. I went to class, I paid attention, I raised my hand, I made sure I was engaged in learning. Did I do all of the work? No. But and this will be kind of one of the hacks we talk about later on. If you want to get better grades in high school, university, okay, there's too much work to do all of it. So ignore all the stuff that isn't graded, but the stuff that is graded, aim to get 100% on every single time. And will you get 100%? Probably not, because some of it's subjective. But you get 95, you get 90, or whatever. You'll do better than you otherwise would. That applies to essays, projects, exams, etc. So I wasn't the best student, but I was a good student that got good enough grades to get me to that next step. Social, like I said, I always liked to take on new things. So high school bleeding into university, but like I taught myself how to make websites. What did I do? I went and got a book and for a couple of weeks just hung out in the library figuring it out. I was always, and still am, a very do-it-yourself kind of guy. There is stuff that I outsource now because it's not the best leverage of my time, but I really get a kick out of, what new skill can I learn now that's going to let me build it myself. And otherwise, how to put me in high school? Yeah, just normal, I guess. Internationally minded, you mentioned. I mean, early on, I started traveling. I think when I was 18, I went to Japan and Korea, traveled around for a month on my own. When I was 19, I went and backpacked around Europe, again, on my own. And since then, the major trips have been China. I've been there 3 times, about 2 years in total.
Wow, so I really want to deconstruct. There's a lot of things that I want to touch on. So I want to start from what you said on focus on what is graded. And I love that because a lot of what I show my students, so they do Model United Nations, and it's a very complex activity. And I always tell them, you need to work smarter, not harder. So what you said about focus on what is graded, to me seems a fantastic way. Like, don't get overwhelmed. with all of the work. Just really focus on those things that are great and then do your best job there. And the second thing I wanted to touch on is you said that you're always taking on new things. So you taught yourself how to make websites. To me, that's, I think of myself as somebody who likes to learn a lot of different things. But as soon as I start doing it, I'm like, oh my God, like it's too overwhelming. So and I'm sure a lot of the students who are listening now, they say that they want to learn new things, but it just seems really overwhelming. So how did you do it yourself? Like, did you create a timeline for yourself? Did you say, I'm going to do this for 1 week and then see how far I get? Was it a project-based thing? How did you do it?
Yep. So should we break that down into the two parts? Talk about school first. Okay. More on how to be a good student that gets the best grades in all your classes. So high school to university to law school, the reading amount just keeps going up and up and up. Like law school, they assign hundreds of pages every night of these tiny little print. There's no time to read all of it. Some of it you do need for the assignments, be selective about it. As far as the other parts of school. So I said, like, go to class and listen. You hear that and you think, okay, well, I do go to class and listen. But no, let's go a step deeper. You go to class and you sit in the front row because now there's no distractions. It's just you and the teacher. And there's probably not too many laptops in high schools yet, but university, like most people, you sit at the back of the class one day, you see everyone with a laptop, they're watching Chinese dramas and they're on Facebook and they're playing Minecraft. These are like, okay, it's okay to do these things, but not in class because you're going to learn nothing. If you pay attention and you ask a question every now and then, learning skyrockets. If you can't bring your laptop to class without going on these things, leave your laptop at home. Okay, the thing everybody's going to say now is, oh, but I use it to take notes too. Well, take notes by hand, right? People who have lived for thousands of years, have learned in universities for at least hundreds of years without laptops, and they did it better than you are now. So, like, don't sabotage yourself with this convenient technology. Here's another thing that I think is important and a little bit less tangible. So stress. Stress is a huge factor in performance. Tests, exams, etc. If you go in and you're in panic mode and you're all uptight about how you're going to do and you didn't study enough and blah, 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 you're probably not going to do very well. Here's what I did. Every exam, and I've written a lot of them, high school, university, law school admissions, law school, bar exams. I've written more exams than anybody. I would study starting early on, and then towards the end, I would cram, right? Just stuff as much as you can the last couple of days because then it's going to be fresh in your mind. I would get a good sleep. I'd wake up early and have a power breakfast, right? Maybe go for a walk or whatever, a little bit of exercise. And then right before the exam, I'd listen to Another One Bites the Dust. And then I'd go in the exam and I'd kill it. I'd just be very comfortable, right? It was almost always a very good result. Everybody listening, you don't have to listen to Another One Bites the Dust, but having a routine that works for you, having a routine that like pumps you up and puts you in the mindset, very, very important. And I think more important than actually like studying and being prepared.
Really? You would go that far? I love what you said because especially so most of our listeners are based out of India, and in India there are these board exams. They need to take in the 10th standard, and they're the most stressful thing that you can ever imagine. They determine your life. Basically, depending on your score, you're either going to be a science student, a commerce student, or an art student. So I think what you just said about even if you feel very stressed, focusing on creating a routine that works for you, I think that a lot of people will be able to apply that because it's incredibly stressful.
I hope so. And I don't expect everyone to let go at the same level of me, right? I remember being in school and we'd be, about to go into the law exam, and everyone else would be like frantically going through their book and highlighting and making notes. And I'd be sitting there eating a muffin and they'd go, Mike, you're the most chill guy ever. I don't expect people to be as relaxed about this as I am, but yeah, build in those routines, be a little bit more relaxed. Still do all your preparation, right? You don't have to throw that all aside. But yeah, find a balance and you'll do well.
And the other thing that you said that I think is important to notice is everything that you said about paying attention in class, not bringing your laptop, sitting in the front. I used to do that all the time, and my friends would they would criticize me all the time. We would enter into the class, and I'd always be like, "Oh my God, let's sit." There's this spot in the front, and they'd be like, "Oh no, you're you're such a nerd." And they would sit in the back, and I was like, "I need to sit in the front, otherwise I will fall asleep or I will check Facebook." So I love what you're saying because it's really such simple things, and it happens. So in Model UN, you're in committee. And the way that you are successful is you literally, it's the simplest thing. You listen to what people are saying, you ask intelligent questions, and you're following the conversation. And it's the same thing in class. But sometimes, even the simplest things, we just don't do them somehow, right? Good, so thank you for that. Now, on the second thing that I had asked you about, skills. How do you go about learning new skills and not getting overwhelmed?
Yep. So I think skills can break down into two parts, right? One is like a smaller skill, cutting a carrot for a soup. This is like a really small thing that you can probably figure out on your own without doing any research, right? You take a carrot, you take a knife, you chop it up. Fine. But tackling those big skills, things like learning computer programming, which I've done too. Things like teaching yourself Chinese. Things like learning, okay, we're going to go beyond the carrot to master like the preparation of French cuisine or Thai cuisine or just cooking in general. I use something I call front-loaded learning. So I commit to learning the basics, the foundation for whatever appropriate period of time. For coding, that meant going to the library, getting a book, and working through all the examples for 2 weeks. And then afterwards, I'll tell you. For cooking, I actually did a 6-month program learning in class. For Chinese, I had 8 months of undergrad in university where they taught, we'll go in depth on learning Chinese later because it deserves its own bit. But they taught like the basic grammar and pronunciation and this kind of thing. So front-loaded learning. Concentrate on just a really strong foundation for a short period of time, and then give yourself permission to learn the rest over time, right? I've learned Chinese over years now. That base foundation means that when you want to learn a new word, when you want to learn a new phrase, you can just look it up and you know enough. Same with web design. If you know, it's called HTML and CSS. Do I know every single little code and tag? No, but I know how to look it up on Google and the answer's, one click away. Same with cooking. Do I know how to make every dish in the world? No, but I know like basics of what goes into a sauce or what goes into a dough or what goes into a cake or what have you. So front-loaded learning, 2 parts. 1, strong foundation. 2, give yourself permission to learn the rest over time.
I love that because I know when I start something, I'm like, I want it to be perfect from the beginning. And I think a lot of people, especially, I know we'll get into languages, but with languages, if it's not perfect, you also feel you feel self-conscious about, I sound like an idiot right now. I don't want to practice, but then you need to practice, otherwise you're not going to get better. So tell me about, actually I'm curious about this, the psychology of learning, like what you said about giving yourself permission to take your time. I think that is very powerful. So how did you think about that? Because as top performers and really ambitious people, we want to be good at it like right away. And it's not always like that.
Yeah, so this is something that I struggled with in the past, and I've only kind of come to accept over time. To put it a different way, like I've accepted that my first version is going to be terrible, but it's the only way I know to get to version number 2. That's more direct in some ways, like building something tangible. But same with Chinese, right? You're right. Like the first conversation I had was, okay, a little bit embarrassing. And then for the first 6 months or whatever, you wouldn't believe how many people in China have told me I'm cute, right? Like, okay, the lawyer from Canada is cute. Why? Because he speaks Chinese like a 6-year-old. But you get better, right? You continue over time. So the psychology of it, accepting that something isn't going to be perfect, you might just have to brute force. You might just have to put it out there.
I mean, I think the other thing is this has happened to me. So I'm learning Hindi and I'm learning something, and a lot of times I'm just like, this is not worth it. Like learning this little verb right now, what's the point? Like I don't see it adding up, right? So kind of taking, you're right, like maybe even the long-term approach, sometimes I would say, even if I would miss class so much, I'd say, even if I just learned one thing from this class, like I'm going to continue doing that.
Yeah, and also be selective about what you are learning, right? I mean, you're right. Probably that one little verb isn't that important right now. But, if you focus on, I think with languages like nouns are so important. Learn as many nouns as you can. I think in the past, growing up in Canada, we start learning French in grade 2. So grade 2 to grade 9, I studied French. Can I speak French? No. Because every single year, we just learned how to conjugate verbs. Grammar is almost irrelevant. If you know nouns, you can communicate most of what you want to say. Will it be perfect? No. But nobody cares because language is about communication, not about being perfect.
I love that.
And people will accept a pretty big gradient of error. I mean, you can think chatting with friends that speak English as a second language, they say stuff to you that sounds a little bit odd, right? But like you still understand and you work with it. And if you don't get it, it's not like you think, oh, this person's an idiot. You think, oh, what do you mean?
Right.
And then they say it another way and you get through. It's the same when you talk to Chinese people. Either they get it in context or they will ask you what you mean.
Right.
Or actually, depending on the culture, sometimes they'll just go, and they have no idea what you're talking about.
Like, yeah, you're right. And then and you're like, wait, answer my question. I love it.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So I want to shift gears a little bit to get into, so that was learning. I love those mindsets. I want to ask you, so one of the things that I admire about you and that I think that our listeners can learn about is you, at some point, and I'd like you to talk about this, you knew that you wanted to be a lawyer. So most people, when they're deciding what to study and what career they're going to get into, I don't even know how we get these ideas. We just kind of feel that it's what it meant to be, or our parents did it. And then we just kind of make a choice, a random choice about, I'm going to be a lawyer. But you took a very different approach to deciding what you were going to study. And then once you decided that you were going to study law, you took a very different approach to learning about the different types of law that happen. So can you walk us through that approach? Because I think it's really valuable and it can be applied to many fields.
Yeah, so I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 5 years old because I thought it would be really cool to drive a Jaguar. That's what you know when you're 5 years old. As well as like 5 other jobs, teacher and astronaut and fireman. And it's a pretty limited world. So you do learn more over time. I see so many people who try to plan for the future, 5 years, 10 years in the future, because that's what our teachers, our parents, etc., tell us to do. But, quite frankly, most of us are pretty bad at planning a week in advance. So I think having long-term goals is good, but again, accepting in this case that they're probably going to change. For me, it was all about, being in discovery mode. And for, all the different things that I did and tried over the years, it was, well, maybe I can reframe this. It's not, I'm starting my career as X. It's, I'm doing an experiment in X. Do I like it? How can I find out if this is something I'm going to want to do for a long time? With blogging, do I want to be a professional blogger? I interviewed Ramit Sethi, Neil Patel, Derek Halpern, etc., because who better to find out from? Plus, I got to learn about it. Plus, I got to pass that value on to other people. With law, before I finished up law school, I actually interviewed, I think, about a dozen lawyers, right? Corporate lawyers, criminal lawyers, human rights activist lawyers. And same deal, like informational interviews. What do you like about what do you do? What don't you like? What's the real deal here? Here's a huge, huge misperception people have about law. Everyone thinks, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to make a lot of money. Well, some lawyers do and some lawyers don't. A lot of them that do are really unhappy, right? They all said things to me, either privately or in the interviews that went public. Law isn't necessarily the thing for me, but I don't know what else I would do. Or, they get hooked on the money because they're 10 years in their career and they have a wife and kids and they are making six figures at least, and it's hard to walk away from that to start something else. So these are kind of the real insights you get when you go and talk to somebody.
So can you break down that process a little bit? So you spoke about testing different things, and I want to get into that when you interviewed your heroes in the online marketing space. But specifically about these lawyers that you interviewed, to me it's amazing because a lot of people don't think about it, right? I want to be a lawyer, and then we just go and like study law, and then we become lawyers. And it is very rare that we think, okay, who is 5 years ahead of me or 10 years ahead of me? Let me ask them what being a lawyer is like, as opposed to what I think that it's like. And I think, first of all, that's a profound shift that you made. But once you decided to interview people, how did you do it? And I think you also have a very interesting story of then later how you monetized it, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic. So please tell us about it.
I do a lot of interviews for everything. It's kind of become a default mode for me now. If I'm starting something, I interview people. Starting a side project, interview. When I started my law firm, I've been meeting with some of the more senior lawyers in town, some of the more senior lawyers in Toronto to figure out like, okay, how did you get from early on to where you are now? And credible insight comes out of that. So the actual step-by-step part. I decide on who I want to talk to. This is sometimes really broad, right? Out of law school, it was, I want to talk to lawyers from all these different industries. Now it's, who are the lawyers who have had careers that look like I want mine to? And I'm still figuring that over time, right? I mean, when I talk to them in my hometown, they were generally like small general practices. When I go and chat with a lawyer in Toronto, they're international expert in whatever it happens to be. So still figuring out that path as I go. Figure out who I want to talk to, reach out to them. That email, usually an email looks like this. Hi, person's name.
Okay.
I found you via X. So maybe it was their website or some other way to connect with them. Like, I'm a new lawyer and my mentor is, person that they will know. So first line, hi X. Second line, some way to connect. Third line, quick compliment about them. Like, you've done a terrific job building up a law practice in Guelph. And I have a few really specific questions I'd like to ask you about it. The line after that, can we please meet for tea? And then suggest a specific place and time. The idea being that by the end of this email, their answer is yes or no or ignore you, because that happens too. People always get discouraged. They're like so panicked about sending out that first email and they don't get a response right away, or maybe they don't get a response at all. Who cares? It's a numbers game. If you email 10 people, 7 or 8 of them will get back to you. People, if you approach them in this honest way, are generally willing to help.
Okay, I love this. I want to break it down a little bit, actually. So I know you're a master at connecting with people and adding value, and it's something that I like to spend a little bit more time on, because some of our students, they're new to this. Like they think that they want to be lawyers, they think that they want to be diplomats, and they understand at some level the value of building these relationships, but they have no idea how to ask the right questions. The script that you just provided, I loved it, and we're going to share it in the blog post. It is very different than what most of my students even do nowadays. They send an email saying, like, for example, a lot of them want to work at the UN. And they send an email saying, oh, I love the UN, I want to work there, do you have an internship? And then, of course, nobody responds to that. But can you walk us through the psychology of why did you write that email in that way? How do you write an email that gets responded to, and how did you create an opportunity for yourself to even talk to them? There was no internship, right? There was no, oh, call us if you want to learn about the law. You can call us at this time. So walk us through that process a little bit.
Okay, so when I write emails, when I write anything, I assume that people are lazy and they don't want to read it, or that they're busy and they don't want to read it. So keep it as short as possible. They don't want paragraphs and paragraphs, because then you're creating work for them. People now, I'll put a post up online that I want to hire an assistant, and I'll say, looking for a person with experience doing X. Don't send me a cover letter or resume. Just send me a quick email. We'll meet for tea. And so many people send like multi-paragraph things with their life story, and I don't want it. Nobody wants it. Just the facts, just enough meat to get your point across is huge, because then you're taking out the time factor, and then you need the compelling factor, which again is where you find some kind of tie-in, right? Like the lawyer from one of the first lawyers I met with, a couple of the lawyers I've met with were from the firm that I used to work at, the big firm that I started with. Of course, they're willing to sit down with, okay, like this guy worked with us and now he's starting out on his own. Like they remember starting out, being on their own, etc. It's a great connection. Other people, yeah, it was as simple as, you know, my mentor is this person. He recommended I chat with you. So give them a reason to talk to you. And I know that's kind of broad, flaky advice, but it's going to be so different for everybody. You know, if you want to connect with somebody at the UN, how would you reach them? I would start with, you know, don't go for the top guy, but also don't go for the lowest. Find somebody in the middle and say like, hey, I'm a student. I found you via the site. I noticed that, you know, you studied at X. Oh, I studied there too. You know, I would love to, maybe they don't live anywhere near you, ask you a few questions. Are you available for a quick phone call on June 12th at 10 a.m. Eastern? Thanks, bye. Right? And again, not everyone's going to respond, but somebody will. There's hundreds of mid-level people in the UN that will be able to get you. And then after you get that first call, one of the questions that you have for them is there anybody else in the organization you recommend that I speak to? Right? Asking referrals is it's kind of like the sales tactic of the century. We're not selling anything here other than ourselves. But now you can go email the second person and say, oh, person one recommended I speak with you. And there's more likely they're going to say yes.
Fantastic. I love it. And one thing that I'm noticing from what you're saying is you're reaching out to these people and it's all about them. You're asking them questions about their career, what they like, even though maybe what you really want is you want an internship at the UN or you want an internship at their company, you want a job, but you don't say that. How do you come across? What is your goal when you meet someone? Obviously, it's not just to get information, right? So can you break down that process for us?
Okay, so how do you take it from meeting to getting that end goal you actually want?
Exactly. What do you do? How do you come up with good questions? What is your goal? So presumably for me, the goal would be to come across as incredibly knowledgeable, you know, having done my research about them, and then be memorable to them so that when an opportunity comes along, then they know that they're referred for that. So how would you do that?
So yes, go and be extremely knowledgeable, do your research, come up with 10 questions, try to answer them all yourself. And if you can answer them really easily, delete them, put them to the bottom and start over. Come up with like really, really, really good questions. Show that you've thought about it. And when you have a conversation with somebody and you know, okay, if you come across as the person that just like called them and didn't really think about it, that's going to show. If you come across as the person that speaks their language and knows like the next 2 or 3 things are going to happen, that shows too. And you separate yourself from the vast majority of people. As far as getting towards the goal of an internship, the first conversation, don't make it about that at all, right? Make it about learning. All you care about is learning. That was the case with law. That was the case with interviewing bloggers. That was the case with when I started a tech company. It was all just informational interviews. And almost without exception, all of those things ended up leading to job offers, money, etc. So yeah, first one, all about the connection. You can let them know what your goal is. Like, okay, at the beginning of the conversation, you know, thanks so much for taking this time to chat with me. I really do want to focus on the learning. And my goal is, you know, I eventually want to have an internship at the UN. I know that you're somebody that did that. Let's talk. And then you ask them all the questions. Don't ask them for an internship at the UN because you're going to turn off everybody in the world. Don't ask them to, if you're making a sales call or whatever, buy something from you. Just like give them information, be cool, and get information back.
God, I love it. And I think that's so important because it's really hard. You kind of need to stop yourself. So now, okay, so you decided I want to learn about law. The best way to do it is I'm going to interview lawyers. Good. How did you then make money out of this and then paid for school? Because that's, I mean, high school students, college students, we all want money, right? To pay for stuff and travel. How did you do that?
Yeah, so this is like my favorite thing in the world, which is I always ask myself, who else, how do I make money at what I'm already doing for free? Okay? And the way that you can do that, simple framework, is ask, who else does this provide value to, or who else could this provide value to? In the case of interviewing lawyers, I went to the careers office at the law school and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to interview a bunch of lawyers and I want the school to sponsor it and we can put these up for all the other students to watch. They loved it, right? All of a sudden we have this new resource. It's no work for them. We have this new resource of video lessons that the students can learn from. If you're in school now, like career office, guidance office, whatever, they're all just like sitting around waiting for student projects to come along. They want to champion your work. They will find a way to help you. In my case, they didn't even pay for it. They went to the bar association and got money from them to pay for it. So that's kind of the simple framework that I've used in other places too. You know, when I wanted to promote myself online and write guest posts, I thought, well, I could just write guest posts, or I could write guest posts about other people and they could pay me for it. And that's been worth thousands and thousands of dollars to me. So what would be another example? What is something that your listeners, your readers do for free now with a goal of turning it into something?
Something that I think they're in the stage before that, because that's why I wanted to talk about how you even came up with the idea of interviewing people. I mean, right now they attend these conferences, these Model U conferences. They could potentially blog about them. Right, but I think they're in the phase of they haven't even imagined that they could be doing these things.
Okay.
That people could pay for.
Yeah. Do they do research? Do they write papers, etc.?
They do. They write these resolutions at the end of committees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody will pay you to do research.
They're great at research. They have to research like international law. They research economic development situations. Good. So maybe that's something they can explore. Like somebody pay them to do research.
Totally.
I love it.
Tutoring is another kind of simple mechanism, right? If you're learning something, you don't have to be an expert at it. You just have to be teaching somebody else and preparing for that, and it'll stick. Okay,
so I want to go back a little bit because you made it sound really easy. You made it sound like, oh, I had this idea of interviewing people and I just went to the career center and then they paid me money for it. But how did you position it, for example, to the career office? Because they could have just said, okay, you want to do it? Okay, do it. They didn't have to pay you. So how did you make that connection?
Yeah, so to be fair, it was really easy. They really did want a project to champion. They loved that a student came to them with something. But how did I frame it?
I love this. Okay, maybe you're not students are not realizing that. I'm sorry to have cut you off.
Yeah, I framed it as it's not about me at all. It's about two things. One, this is like a really good project for the career office. It wasn't about me, right? It's not my interview show. It's the careers office show. And the second thing, benefit to students. Here's the 3 ways it'll benefit students, right? They'll learn from lawyers that are actually doing it, and this is another way to get the information. And oh, I noticed that your site already has these written profiles. This is a nice complement to it. Something like that, right? They have their agenda. They have their goals that they want to meet. So yeah, make it all about them. Same with, I mentioned writing these articles, guides about other people. Yes, I got the benefit of the post and the traffic that comes from that, but the articles are not about me. It's like 10,000 words about somebody else. So the benefit looks like it is all for them. And not just looks like, most of it is, but I'm in there too.
Right, you're the one who authored it, and your name is also behind it. Fantastic. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, I definitely want to get into writer reviews and when you're interviewing people. But I'm curious, should we go into writer reviews first or should we go into China first?
So writer reviews happened before China.
So let's get into writer reviews. So, okay, another example of how, Michael, you think differently and you've acted differently. And it's the same thing that you used, and I love it because you got good at one skill and a lot of people just keep it there. But then you applied it to something else in your life. Like there's no reason to get a new skill. You can just change it. So what you did is there were some people that you admired online and you took a different approach. Most people, I mean, everyone watching here, there's somebody who we admire, right? And we kind of get this fan like approach and like, oh my God, they're so great. And we look at them and maybe if one day we run into them, like we take a photo with them. But that's it. And you took a very different approach. You actually reached out to them. So tell us about that process of how you thought about it and how that's different from what other people do. And then tell us what you did.
Okay, so actually reaching out to them, connecting with them. I tried to find a way that I could add value to them. And in this case, write reviews. It meant setting up a very simple website, a website that was quite ugly at first. And, reach out to famous blogger that I read, interview them for 1 hour, put it on the site, write a guest post about it. So what value are they getting from this? It's not the pleasure of a 1 hour conversation with me. They don't know me. They're getting a link from my site. They're getting a link from another site. And that's valuable to somebody that does business online. With some of the lawyers that I reached out to, my pitch was a little bit different. It was, hey, I can buy you lunch. Well, actually, the lunch isn't a huge deal for them, right? They have money for lunch. The second is they actually can get credit with the Law Society for time that they spend mentoring. So I'd go, look, you could go to those boring lunchtime sessions where you watch a pre-recorded video that everybody hates, or you can come out for lunch with me and chat, and I'll take notes and I'll make sure you get the credit for it. So, again, find a way that it values them. Set up this website, interview them, put it on there. Is something that would work, I think, in almost any industry, right? You want to connect with people in the UN, you could create a website where you interview people related to the UN. Not everybody has to be UN. You could go to other international organizations, right? And just talk to them, put them online, give them a platform where they're, people like to tell their story. They like to educate others. They like to have a voice. Not everybody. Some people are really shy, but you will find people that want to do that.
Okay. I want to just ask you a quick question about that. So you decided I want to connect with these people. I'm going to create a website where I'm going to interview them and post those interviews because they're going to want to have that exposure. It sounds like a fantastic idea. Like, you want to connect with politicians. You want to connect with entrepreneurs. It's a fantastic idea that I think a lot of people in the online marketing space do, but I think not enough people in, brick and mortar kind of jobs do. What were some of the fears that went through your mind or some of the barriers that you faced? Because it sounds really easy. Oh, want to connect with people? Build a website. But I'm sure there must have been something. Why do more people not do it?
I was really nervous the first time I got on the call to do an interview. The first interview I did for Right of Use was with a guy named Trent Han. He has a personal finance site called The Simple Dollar. And I remember the butterflies in the stomach and, handshaking. And you get on the call and you do the first couple minutes and that goes away over time. In subsequent interviews, it got a lot easier until I interviewed Ramit. When I got on the first call with Ramit Sethi, IWillTeachYouBeRich.com, I was nervous because he's somebody that I really look up to now. And
just for our viewers, so Ramit Sethi, he wrote a New York Times best-selling book. He has a blog that is very, very, very popular, and through that, he runs a multi-million-dollar business. So you looked up to him. Go on.
Yeah. So I'm nervous about that one too, but again, just pushing yourself through it, forcing yourself through in it, making commitments. Okay, so pressing a send button is relatively easy. Getting it scheduled is relatively easy. And if something's scheduled, I'm definitely going to show up and I'm definitely going to record it. And if this person spent an hour with you because you've told them you're going to post it online, you better post it online. So creating accountability, creating external factors to push you through the kind of negative chatter and the butterflies.
Okay, I love this that you said the negative chatter, because I actually want to get a little bit into that, because I know that you were in this program True Mind with Andrew Warner, and it's what I'm going to say is my very surface level understanding, but it's about this negative chatter that we all have, right? So people who are listening to this, in Model UN, when you winning the top award is being best delegate. That's like what we call that, right? They want to be best delegate, or they want to get into a top university, or they want to get a top internship. They want to do great things, but there's always this chatter of like, oh, I'm not good enough, or oh, I'm not that type of person. And I know that you struggled with that as well. So I was wondering if you could walk us through that the process that you've used and that people listening to us right now can use to deconstruct those mental barriers.
Yeah, let's go through the process, and I'll give you a specific example that applies to me. So process looks like this. 1, set a specific goal. Yeah, it's becoming the award-winning delegate, or it's starting a business, or it's networking, connecting with more people. It can be really, really big, or it can be really, really small. The next step is to write down on a piece of paper, just list form, all the negative chatter that comes to mind. You gave the examples of, oh, I'm not good enough to be the top delegate, or, oh, that would take too much work, I just don't have time for it. There's like so much that circles around in our mind, and putting it down on paper sounds so simple, but it's actually like a really powerful and therapeutic process. Now it's on paper. Now it's tangible. A lot of people find even in that step that it's like this huge release of pressure. So step 1, set goal. Step 2, list off the negative chatter. Step 3, question them one by one. So the questions are, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it wanted? So if I am going to be the top delegate, then I have to, my grades are going to suffer. Is it true? Probably not. Is it helpful? No. Is it wanted? No. Okay, you can throw that one out the door. Other things are really interesting. Like one of mine was, I'm not as decisive as, again, Ramit Sethi, or I'm not the visionary that Elon Musk is. Is it true? Absolutely. Does it matter? No, because I have all these other qualities that they don't have, and it all bounces out, and I'm on my own path, etc. I'll go back into my specific example after. So you're questioning them one by one. Once you've done that, list off positive statements that counter the negative chatter. So it doesn't have to be a direct word for word opposite, but for example, this is one that applies to me. I don't need to sleep. I'm going to stay up and finish this. The positive form of that is, sleep and exercise and good diet are the foundation of being productive, right? These are what are going to allow me to get somewhere over time. So replace them with the positive statements. Final phase is boil it down to one clear, short statement and repeat it day after day. So True Mind actually comes along with these little wooden bracelets, and Andrew suggests, right, one by one, say my positive statement, until you're all the way around the ring. I mean, it's just a tool, but it's really helpful. It's a constant reminder. It's always here. You can do it before.
I love it.
You can do it before you go to bed at night. You can do it while you're eating breakfast. You can do it when you're on the bus. Whatever. Just it's on your wrist. You remember, do it. Here's a few specific examples. One of the guys in the group, he had a really, really short one. He just said, connect, because his goal was to network. His goal was to connect with more people. And whenever he was in these social situations, he'd get nervous about it. So connect was enough of a boost to get him to at least start talking to the person. Now, let me walk you through the whole arc, the whole process for me. When I went through it the first time, my goal was start a business that makes X number of dollars in X period of time. And I had a lot of insecurities about it. So, for example, looking at friends who have taken safe jobs and who are getting married and having kids and like relatively simple, easy life. So the negative chatter was something like, if I do this, I'm missing out on that. And again, comparing myself to Ramit, he's, decisive and extraordinary in so many ways.
Right.
Elon Musk. So I think 3 out of 5 were comparing myself to other people, and then the other 2 were something else. So when I challenged those, like I said, some of them are true, some of them are not, and go into the positive statements, I replace them with things like, I care about X. So my priority is having a successful business so that I can do charity work later on. My priority is not, have a family, kids, etc. Or, I'm on my own path. Eventually what it turned into with my one concrete positive statement was, I am my own success story. And that was acknowledging that, okay, first of all, I've been successful at a lot of things in the past, and I expect that to continue. And by calling it, my own story, it kind of reframed it in my mind as, my own path. There's no need to compare to anybody else. It doesn't matter how they've defined success. It doesn't matter how they've achieved success, because I'll find my own way to do it. That was hugely, hugely liberating.
I love it. I am my own success story. And I love it because it resonates with me, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of the students who are listening, because a lot of times we see somebody else our age or even younger. I mean, it's worse when they're younger than you, and they're just way ahead of where you'd like to be. And then something that I've experienced is I've seen very successful people, and I literally would get almost an anxiety attack as, what am I doing with my life? Like, should I be doing something else? And then it was just this really uncomfortable thing that was incredibly unproductive. So it sounds like you were having something kind of similar, like in comparing yourself to other people. And then really important to say, I am my own success story. I love that. I absolutely love that. So that must have been a process for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd add one little tip at the end here, which is, okay, we've listed off the 5 steps or whatever. Don't sit down and try to do them all in the next 10 minutes. Do one step, and then 3 or 4 days later, a week later, put in your calendar. A week later, do the second step. A week later, do the third step. Because you're going to have insights over that period of time. Like, talk to other people about it. You're going to have insights that make the process that much richer.
Oh, I love it. Okay. The other thing is you selected them, right? So there was all this negative chatter, and you selected one that worked better. Like the one that would be most impactful for you at that time, right?
Yep.
Because that's something that happens, right? We're like, I have all of these things that I need to deal with, and we do them all at once, and then we don't really do them. So how do you make it a consistent process and not just this 10-minute thing that you were talking about?
Yep. So 1, I calendar everything. 2, I send myself more emails than anybody else in the world. I probably send myself 100 emails a week. And then I have a mailbox app, and you can just swipe, like, tell me that again next week, or tell me that tonight, or a couple of days. And this is the way that I keep what I need to do in its place and time.
Fantastic. Okay, so now I want to shift gears a little bit and get into. We spoke about ride reviews very little, but I want to talk about when you decided to go to China. So you're an undergraduate student, correct?
No.
And then, no, you were younger.
Okay. First time I went to China was I studied 8 months at the end of university, undergrad, and the teacher offered to lead a trip there for a month. I stayed 4 months because I figured I'm flying there anyways. I may as well stay the whole summer.
Of course.
And then the second time I went was after 3 years of law school. And then the third time I went was after a year of, it's called articling. It's like the internship to become a lawyer.
Okay, but so you went to China and you did an internship there. So what was that? Was that an unusual choice? So going over the summer, okay, big deal. You went over for the summer. But then doing your internship there and then moving there later.
Yeah, no, sorry. I did my internship in Canada. Let me tell you about the choice. I'll just walk us through it. So during law school, actually up until law school, I had this dream of a long time for getting into the restaurant business since I was like 15 years old. 15 years old, I was washing dishes and worked my way up to like line cook and bartender and server and VIP, dining room manager, catering, all of this stuff, with the goal of building a restaurant empire. But when I actually looked at the landscape in Canada, it's not good, right? Very high startup costs, very high ongoing costs, small market. They don't eat out very often. They don't spend a lot of money. It's like tough business to get into. Law school, though, I met this friend, a classmate who was from Taiwan, from China. Mm-hmm. He came to Canada to do his master's in law, but him and his wife wanted to go back to Beijing and open up restaurants. So I went, okay, I've been there before. I speak like some Mandarin. I could definitely get better. And, you know, here's a way that I could realize my dream of opening restaurants. So when I went over, I set up in Beijing. He got over there a year before I did, set up the first restaurant. It was pretty busy by the time I got there. And then it was relatively easy to settle in and join him.
Wait. Okay, so you had spent the summer in China. You came back to Canada. You graduated, right? And
Okay, so 2008,
said,
I finished my undergrad, and 2008, I spent the summer in China.
Okay.
Started law school September 2008, and 2011, when I finished law school, is when I went back to China again.
With the restaurant business.
That's right.
Okay, so how did you decide to go to China at that point? I mean, I'm sure, what were your peers doing? They're probably getting into this nice corporate jobs. Working. So how did you make that choice? Like, how is that different?
So again, it had been something I wanted to do for a long time. Actually, even when I was in China the first time, I was there going, oh, should I stay in China and open a business, or should I go back to Canada and be a law student? In hindsight, there's actually a lot that points towards I should have just stayed there and done business. When I came back and started law, I didn't like being a law student. I loved being a lawyer. I didn't like being a law student. And after the first year, I kind of looked at it and went, this isn't for me. You know, I want to consider other things. But I had health crisis at the time. It wasn't practical for me to consider doing something else. It made sense to just, keep going to class and writing exams, because that's about all I had energy for. So it was something that had been on the plate for a while, and here was a practical opportunity to do it. I think people look at, go to China and start a business as, that's a really risky decision, versus, stay here and get a corporate job is a very practical, safe one. But actually, whenever you have a really risky decision, you can mitigate so much of that risk. So what did I do? Before I went to China, I got a job lined up at a big firm. Right? I applied. I went through the process, not the same process as everyone else, but I had a job lined up so that if China didn't work out, 10 months later or whatever, I could start at a law firm in Canada. Big part of the risk mitigated. I'd saved up money so that when I was there, I could afford to live and focus on this. Money is another great way to mitigate risk. And just start with the big things, move on to the little ones, and you'll get there.
Got it. Okay, so you went there, you stayed there, and then what happened? You were there for 1 year?
About a year, yeah.
About a year. And in this process is when you were still interviewing authors. You were doing the restaurant. You were doing 3 things at once, right?
Yeah, I was doing too much.
Okay, but I want to know about that, because a lot of the people listening, they're really ambitious. They have a lot of different passions, and they feel India is very much like Canada in that when you go to undergrad, what you study is what you study. Like, it is what it is. Like, you study economics, and that's all that you do. And they feel that they have all these passions, but they have to choose one. But you kind of carved out a path for yourself, and you were trying different things. So talk to us about what you were trying and how you were thinking about your learning at that time.
Yeah, so it was discovery mode. It was, how many things can I take on reasonably that I'm interested in? What is like a really focused way I can learn about them quickly, and also how do I make money from them? So joining my friend's restaurant was different than starting my own, right? They were already set up. It was very, very simple to get integrated in there. Doing writer views was, again, discovery. Do I want to be a blogger? Do I want to be a professional writer? There was an app that I was working with. Well, my aunt is, she's in private equity. She was working with a company. They wanted somebody to promote their app. So I said, okay, whatever, I'll try it. And that one actually burnt out pretty quickly. An app, I don't want to do it for somebody else. It was too much work with not enough payoff. I made so many phone calls and got nowhere because they had built this thing without doing any research on the market. So that one was the one that died first. Writer views eventually died because of the technology was a pain in China. Getting on a Skype call like this is hard when you don't have reliable Wi-Fi. And, you know, I couldn't even watch the videos on my own site because the host was blocked in China.
Right. Oh, no.
And also, right of use led to paid freelancing work. And then it became more, you know, all of a sudden I could learn about being a writer and be paid pretty well to do it at the same time. So right of use died for a lot of reasons. The restaurant just ran out of time. The timeline my friends had to open their second one and I'd be involved with didn't mesh very well with my timeline with the law firm in Canada. And I made the decision that, you know, I can always go back and do the restaurant. I already have this job lined up. I'm going to go work for a year in Canada and finish off my license, and then I can go. So, I mean, there's so many different factors. You make the decisions as you go. You make them the best you can. You don't always make them perfectly, but you keep moving forward.
No, I love it. And okay, so I want to talk about, you said that this writing turned into paid work. I want to talk about that transition because, I mean, at some point your restaurant job was gone and you were supporting yourself basically on your freelance income, right? As a writer.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to go abroad and they're like, oh, but I don't have any money. Like, what are people going to pay me for? And you were able to do that successfully. So I want to know, how did you turn from writing or interviewing people? How did that turn into paid work?
Yep. I have really specific advice about freelancing, which maybe we can push off a little bit further. And I'll tell you about my experience doing it, which is relatively unique. So I was doing all of these interviews with, you know, successful writers, bloggers, etc. And I would interview them and then I'd write an article about it. So first time I interviewed Ramit, interviewed him, put it on my site, wrote an article and put it on the site's called problogger.net. And
so it wasn't just the interview. It was the interview, the transcript, and an article about what you had learned?
And then write an article about, exactly.
Okay.
Which, besides, okay, this is another way, like provides value to other people, also huge value to you. If you talk to somebody for an hour, you learn a lot. If you go back and listen to that conversation multiple times and you write an article, how-to article about it, you learn it so much better. So I did that. A few months later, Ramit was releasing his dream job program, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, can we please do another interview and you write another article about it? And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to. So did it again, put up the article. It turned out to be a very popular one online. It was a very, very long article. If your readers want to Google it, it's called Ramit Sethi Exposed, How He Earns Millions Blogging. And it blows 99.9% of blog posts out of the water. That's just a fact. Okay. So
I love that because you weren't just doing some interviews and then writing some like half-baked article about it. You did something very specific to stand out.
Yeah. So I wrote, it's I forget how many words it is, but it's like 10,000 words. It has a table of contents. It has like...
All your lawyer training came into play there.
Yeah, it has sections in it that are longer than most guest posts. And extraordinary detail. There's no fluff here. It's like very, very good. To the point where you could sell this thing as a product, right? If people paid money for this, they'd be getting good value. So what actually happened then? Ramit had seen my work, right? He knew that I was a good writer. That's important to him, technical competence. Second, we had emailed back and forth. I send him really short emails. Everyone else sends him long emails. He likes the communication style. He knows it'll work well with me. So when he needed somebody to work with him to do case studies, he was like, okay, here's a guy that knows how to interview. He's like pretty nice, cool guy. And he's a good writer too. It's perfect. So he actually reached out to me and said, hey, Michael, do you want to work with me doing, XYZ? We jumped on a call and we figured it out from there. So that's actually something I'm quite proud of. There's a lot of people who would, when Ramit puts out a job posting, hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. But even though those were accessible to him, he reached out to me. Why? Again, what I just told you. He had seen my work. It was good. And, communication style all works out.
I love it. I want to ask you something about, so Ramit is somebody that you admired, and I know you still do. How do you have a negotiation conversation with somebody you admire? Like, how did that, because then you grew, right? You started, you told me, like a certain rate an hour, and then you skyrocketed your rates. How do you do that with somebody who you have kind of this admiration
Yep.
for?
So raising rates with an existing client is very, very difficult. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert at it, right? There's probably better sources. So usually when I was raising my rates, it was with new clients that don't know what you've charged in the past. And you get there by having great referral sources and testimonials, etc. You know, for example, okay, first conversation with Ramit, he asked me to do this work, and then he said, you know, what do you usually charge? At that time, I hadn't done a lot of freelancing in the past. I had done like a random website here or there. I'd done a little bit of like random tutoring and stuff, but not this consistent work. I didn't know how to bill for it. So my response to him was, well, you know what you've paid for these in the past. Let's just use that as a base rate. That's not good negotiations because it puts all the power in the client's hand. But it worked out well, and Ramit's a smart guy. He didn't try to lowball me because he knows that if you lowball somebody, they're not going to stick around very long, right? So it worked out anyways. For other people, I think you'd need to be a little bit more assertive and a little bit more knowing your value in approaching these conversations, right? Most clients are not as sophisticated as Ramit. So look at the work you're doing. Start at, like, say $50 an hour. Start at a number that makes you go, oh yeah, that's a little bit high, but actually it's not,
I'm worth it.
it's not phenomenally high. Yeah, as a starting point. And then,
I love it.
And then negotiating, moving it upwards, just give them lots of heads up, right? Don't spring this decision on somebody. Don't make it an ultimatum. Just, hey, you know, this is what's happening in my business. I'm planning to raise my rates in a couple of months to, you know, make sure I can cover X, Y, Z and keep doing terrific work from you. I'll follow up then. And then
okay, good.
Yeah.
So you kind of tell them beforehand, and then you work up to that. Got it.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you just one last question about freelancing, and then I want to get into learning Mandarin. Did you ever think of it? You have really high-profile clients. Were you ever thinking? Did you have like a target list of I want to work with these 5 people, or was it more organic, or were you ever like on business growth mode?
Most clients reached out to me when I was freelancing. I was also traveling, and I was also doing the thing with the restaurant. And then when I came back to Canada, I was doing the articling as a law student. All of these are like full-time jobs. I didn't need the writing to grow. Having, you know, a few clients at a time was enough, and recurring work. So target list of people that I wanted to work for, no. But other people did reach out to me, right? After I wrote the initial article about Ramit, Derek Halpern sent me an email that said, dude, how do I get you to write articles like this about my business? Okay, he became a client. Same with others. So I think if you were going to be intentional about growth, look for people who are related or similar to your existing clients. If you have one good client, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other people like them in the world. If there's people that they're connected to, you can get referrals. Again, referrals are like the easiest way to make a sale in the world because you come with credibility. Yeah.
I love it. I love it because you did a really, really good job, and then people started reaching out to you. And I think that's a very fortunate position to be in.
Totally.
Wonderful. Okay, so then this last section of the interview that I want to talk about is how you learn Mandarin, right? So in this day and age, everybody wants to learn Mandarin. Everybody wants to go to China. And this is something that you were able to do it. So I want to talk about how you thought about it and the hard parts when you were doing it. Like if somebody, right now, I want to learn Mandarin, somebody watching, they want to do it, they haven't taken any Mandarin. Based on what you've learned, what would you advise them to do?
Okay, step by step how to learn Mandarin.
Let's do it right now.
The Michael Alexis guide. Yeah, let's do it. So first thing I mentioned in the front-loaded learning section, start with a solid foundation. And don't try to teach yourself. Hire a teacher, right? A lot of schools are offering it now. If that's not an option, like find somebody to tutor you, but make sure that they're taking care of the structure. They're testing you every week, like treat it like a class. And then once you have that base foundation, go to get language partners. And there's a few different places you can do that. So one, there's a website that I used 5 years ago or whatever called livemocha.com. There's also all kinds of apps now. You just go on, you create a profile. It matches you with people that, you know, speak Chinese, want to learn English, and you with those people, so you can teach each other. Language partners are like not the best way to learn, because again, they want to spend a lot of time learning English, but it gives you a natural language component that reading out of a textbook never can, right? You learn how people actually speak. For example, you know, you read a textbook and the English version of it would be, hello, how do you do today? I am fine, thank you. And sometimes when you talk to English as a second language people, this is how they speak. And if you just learn from a textbook, that's how you're going to sound too. But with language partners, you get used to talking with young people, right? Like teenagers and all their weird slang. And you get used to talking to professionals, like there's teachers, etc., that use these things. You get used to dialects. Dialects are a huge thing. Accents that, yeah, if you're listening to the audio cassette that came with your book, it's all perfect and easy to understand. Versus, you know, when you actually go and hang out on the streets of China and are trying to negotiate with a vendor, they sound nothing like the book. So, all right, step one was get a formal teacher, learn. Step two is get a language partner from one of these tools that I mentioned. Step three, go live in China. There is no better way to learn the language than to immerse yourself. And to Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, these are places that people usually go, big cities on the East Coast. No, you can't go to those places because almost everybody speaks English. And you're going to make friends that speak English, and you're going to go to businesses that speak English, and you're not going to learn anything. So you have to go somewhere more remote. If you go to Western China, if you go to Southern China, you can find places where you're like the only English-speaking person in the city. That was me. So, full immersion, you're forced to use it in every conversation. Yes, it becomes difficult to check into a hotel. Yes, it becomes, difficult to get a meal. But you have to learn it if you want to eat. When I went over to China the first time, I thought I was so cool because, I speak Chinese. I know how to say, 我会中文. I can speak Chinese. But I went to a restaurant and I realized all I knew how to say was like banana and rice, and I wasn't going to eat very well. So I actually got cheated on the first meal. They charged me, $4 or $5 for a bowl of water with like 2 noodles and a carrot in it. It was ridiculous. But after that, I went home and I got the dictionary and I learned, like, here's a list of all the meat. Here's a list of all the vegetables. Here's a list of all the noodles. And the next time I went to a restaurant, I was in much better shape to do it. It's still hard because when you look at a menu, it doesn't say chicken and onions. It's like how we have fancy names for something, right? Like, what's an example?
I don't know, like cordon bleu, like whatever.
Yeah, this kind of thing, right? Like they're all named after like some city or a person or whatever. But
dark Belgian chocolate cake, and you're like, what?
Yeah. You learn it over time. So forcing yourself into it. Same with train tickets. Like, okay, better learn the train ticket conversation, better learn the hotel conversation, and then immersing yourself, going somewhere. Make friends that don't speak English. And by don't speak English, I mean literally, they know less than 10 words. It's like, hello, thank you, goodbye, that's it. Because if they speak more than that, you're going to be lazy and you're going to default to English. And this goes to the next step, which is, if it's possible for you, get a boyfriend or girlfriend that speaks Mandarin. There was 2 months that I lived in southern China, and I dated a girl for about 6 weeks of those.
I love
and
this.
She didn't speak a word of English. And that was perfect because this girl, she talked a lot. She talked to me a lot. She talked in Mandarin all the time, and her pronunciation was like clear and good. So it was forced learning. It was fun learning, right? Like hanging out with this girl, we'd go to the beach or we'd go to the park or we'd go eat a meal or whatever. And it was just a really natural way of doing it versus trying to sit at home with a textbook is boring. And again, not a good way to learn it. I've tried in the past to, whether I'm in Canada or China, I'll listen to the audio, I'll do the lessons, and like 2 or 3 days in, I'll just stop doing it because it's boring. Yeah. So force yourself into immersion. And the last thing is Chinese. There's actually an iPhone app. Actually, it's probably for different platforms too. It's called Weixin, WeChat. And it lets you send text messages. It lets you send voice messages. And everybody in China uses it. So even now when I'm in Canada, I still practice Chinese every single day. Not because I'm waking up and I'm studying for an hour, but because I can just send a message that says, blah, 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 whatever.
I love that. I love that because a lot of times I know that I feel guilty. I'm like, I'm learning Hindi. I should sit down and really buckle down and read my book. And I'm like, I don't do it. And then I feel guilty because I'm like, why am I being such a lazy person? But what you're saying is figure out what works for you and something that's going to be easy and something that's going to be fun for you. Like you don't have to kill yourself doing it, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so the last thing that I want to ask you, Michael, is what I've been getting from this, and I think my biggest learning from this conversation with you is you have a very unique process for learning and for growing. And I think perhaps the people listening right now, they're in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. Maybe they haven't discerned that yet, but I think people around our age, we all know that, you have to ask questions. Ramid writes about the best $20 you'll ever spend are taking somebody out to lunch. And yet, most of us never do it. And you've consistently, systematically used this approach. And I think it is incredibly valuable. So I want you to wrap up with understanding your process for learning and growing. And I want to do it by asking you 2 questions. One is, I'll get to the second one later. What is your proudest accomplishment to date? What are you most proud of?
So I think I live behind a bit of a reality distortion field because every now and then somebody will be like, oh, it's amazing that you can speak Mandarin. And I'll go, eh. Or, oh, it's so amazing that you went to law school and you got this job at a top firm and now you're starting out your own practice. And I go, eh. It's like, I don't know how other people view things and how I view them. Yes, I've taken pride in what I do, right? Like I was proud to work with Ramit, like I said, when he reached out to me. There's some pride in being able to speak Mandarin. There's some pride in being a lawyer, but nothing that I would call like standing out pinnacle achievement of my life because that moment is still to come.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now my second question, what's your goal now? What is that big thing? You've changed focus. You went from discovery mode and now you're in the, what do you call it mode? Like you focus on your business and you have a little project on the side. Yeah. What mode are you in? What's the goal?
So goal right now is make as much money as I can and save as much money as I can so that I can dedicate a very large part of my life to charity.
Wow. Okay. And do you know specifically which area in charity?
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll save that for another interview.
Okay, we'll save that for another interview. Okay, so now to wrap up with your process for learning and growing. So that's your goal. So people listening right now, they have different goals. They want to get into a top university. They want to win best delegate. They want to get an amazing job. How are you approaching that? So I heard you from the interview, you said you're setting up your law firm and you're talking to very established lawyers. So that's one thing. So tell us how you're going about accomplishing your goal so that we can kind of leave with that and say, okay, these are the steps that I can take for my own goals.
Okay, so first of all, SMART goals, right, is in every business textbook everywhere, and productivity textbook, etc. It is more definite than that. I have a number in mind for how much I want to make long term, what that means I need to make per year, etc. And then it comes down to doing math. Like, will a law firm, assuming I can get X number of clients, provide that amount of money? Well, no, not me personally. Okay, how do I get it there? Well, if I hire a second person, 2, 3, 4 people, actually, 4 lawyers working reasonable hours a week, charging reasonable rates can generate $1 million a year after costs and taxes, etc. That's the kind of math, that's the kind of thinking I do to break down a big goal. As far as getting there, I wake up every morning with fire in my belly. I wake up to work and
I love it.
Prioritize what I want to work on and care about. Here's an example. So we had the long weekend earlier last month, and of course somebody says, "Oh, Michael, do you want to go to the cottage with us for the weekend?" I would love to go to the cottage. I think sitting on the deck and drinking beers and fishing with my buddies would be a very good time, but that's like 0 steps, 0 progress towards my goal. So I chose to stay in Guelph and I chose to work on it incrementally. That one weekend isn't going to make a big difference, but something comes up pretty much every weekend. And keeping those incremental things from becoming big distractions, I think is what's so important. One of the questions that you asked me before the interview was about money, and if we have time, I'd love to go on a rant about money too.
Please.
So, money for going after the big goals, money for being able to go travel for a year, money for buying a fancy car. I don't care, whatever you want to prioritize. There's 3 things that I recommend for going about it. One is freelancing. Freelancing, if you can get clients, is a very good return on your time. So what do you do to get clients? Step 1, go to Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com. And this is a site where people sell simple services for $5-10 a piece. You're not going on this site to make a lot of money. You're going on this site to get a little bit of experience. You're going on this site because when you do a good job for somebody, they're going to leave a positive review, and that's something you can leverage later on. And you're going on this site to learn what is something I can do that people actually pay for? So you go on there, people design logos and they'll write testimonials and they'll make you little videos, or they'll do all kinds of stuff. If somebody is paying another person to do it, they'll pay you to do it too. Okay, so you go there, you do a few gigs, you get the positive testimonials, and now you go after higher value clients. And we've talked about sending the really short emails, etc. I wouldn't target somebody like Ramit right away, but lower level, hey person, I do X. I write case studies. Here's a link to an example of one I've done. Here's a testimonial from a previous client. I'd love to write case studies for you. This is my rate. Thanks, bye. Just really simple and straightforward. And you do that long enough, you send enough of those emails, and you're going to get a client. And then continue and leveraging your way up. So the first deal's Fiverr. Fiverr clients are terrible. I've never actually provided service on there, but this is how I've coached friends to become freelancers. They'll go on there. They get totally unreasonable requests. Somebody will be like, "Oh, can you translate this entire book for $5?" And I look at that and I go "Are you serious? Nobody's willing to do that amount of work." But so you start with these cheap clients, and then you work slightly up and up and up, and then eventually you're serving clients that will pay you $50, $100 an hour, and those numbers add up really quickly. Because when you go, going back to the travel example, you want to go live overseas. Beijing's expensive, Shanghai's expensive, capital cities are expensive, but you go live somewhere remote and your apartment is $100 a month. If you're charging $100 an hour, you work for a week and you can pay for your apartment for the entire year, right? And then you work.
That's amazing.
And then you work for another week and you can pay for your food for an entire year. And you work for another week and you've got money to do whatever. So freelancing is high leverage on your time, again, as long as you figure out how to get clients. And it's ideal because if it's something you're doing online, you can do it anywhere, right? I mean, some client work, I've done the most ridiculous places. I'd be on a 20-hour train ride from one city to another one in Western China, and I'd be sitting there on my iPhone writing out an article for a client. Totally ridiculous, but they don't care. They just want the final result. And I was making more than enough money to pay for my train ride, to pay for the hotels wherever I was arriving, to pay this kind of thing. So, I mean, save up some money before you go and then keep working while you're there. Another
amazing.
rant about money. Be ruthless about cutting costs. And a lot of people, I think, know this intuitively, right? Like, if you save money, then you can spend it on something else. Okay, but how do you really truly be ruthless about costs and prioritize? Here are things that I've cut out in the past. Most of the time in Canada, I didn't have a cell phone. I have one now because a lawyer has to have a cell phone. But in the past when I was a university student, you wouldn't believe how many conversations I had with people where they were like, "What do you mean you don't have a phone?" I go, it's just not important to me. And they'll get in touch with you by email, and you can call them using Skype, which is pay as you go. And all of a sudden your phone bill is like $25 a year versus $850, right? This is huge. And everybody listening to this is going, "Oh, I can't live without my phone. That's important to me." Again, people have lived for thousands of years without phones. You can do it too. So you're choosing what to prioritize on. And that's fine. If the phone's that important to you, keep it. Here's another thing, like restaurants, bars, etc. All of this stuff adds up really, really, really quickly. And it's, again, examples of incremental things adding up. Okay, go to the restaurant, spend $10, $15, $20. Not a big deal. Go there 2, 3, 4 times a week, and all of a sudden you're talking about $100 a week, $400 a month, $5,000 a year. $5,000 a year goes very far in China, right? That's more than most Chinese people earn in a year. So think of it this way, and think of like breaking these small costs down into something more tangible than, oh, my dream trip to China in the future. Think of it as, okay, when I was planning to go to China and open up a restaurant, the cost to employ a restaurant worker in China, so server, kitchen guy, whatever, is about $300 a month. A little bit more than that in Beijing now, but we'll say $300 a month. So every time I can earn or save $300, I can employ somebody for a month. It's huge, right? The rent one's an example too. Well, yeah, I could go out with my friends and have a really good time partying or whatever, and it costs $120. Or that's rent for an entire month. So start thinking of it this way. Start thinking of the actual trade-off, and you should be a little bit better about sticking with it. And learn to say no to friends, because friends are not good for your budget.
They're absolutely not. And what you said about restaurants, yeah, one time it's fine, but then you're going like every weekend or like 4 times a week. It becomes like,
and then you get your visa bill, and it's like, holy crap, how did I spend $800?
Exactly. You know, I love this, and I love the freelancing thing. So what are things that high school students can do just to close? So you said research, specifically Model UN. Students who do Model UN, they can do research. They can write. You were talking a lot about writing gigs. They can tutor. You talked about tutoring. So if you're really good at math, you're really good at a particular subject, you can tutor other people.
Yep. I think websites are a relatively easy one to get into too. Again, that's the first kind of freelancing I did. I think my first client, I charged $2,000 to build him a site. Okay.
That's pretty good money.
People are intimidated by technology, and you don't have to learn very much to get past that curve. So if you're learning anything like website design, coding, whatever, here's what I recommend. There's a book called Head First, HTML and CSS, Head First, PHP. Start with the HTML, CSS one, learn the basics, and then go play around. You can set up a WordPress site, like some ridiculous amount, like 25% of sites online are built on WordPress. And once you can do that, you can set up a website in like 15 minutes, and you can make it pretty in like a few hours. And there are a lot of people out there that need websites. Not all of them will pay you well, right? Go on Craigslist, go on Kijiji, and you're going to get cheap people who don't want to pay you a lot of money. But starting out, that's okay. Just build them a site, get $150, get paid up front because you don't want to get screwed for people not paying you. And then again, leverage your way up. So web design is a good one.
Okay.
Other things that, well, once you become better at something, kind of like tutoring, but coaching, right? Coaching or consulting, giving advice. Everything from...
That sounds hard. Consulting, to me, I hear it and I'm like, oh.
It's higher level because people expect you to be very, very, very good at what you do. So, okay, that's something later on. If you're a high school student, you can paint people's houses. right? You can clean people's offices. Any of these things are actually like relatively easy money. So anybody that has an office probably needs it cleaned. Offer to clean it the first time for, if it's a small office, like $20. And then all of a sudden it's a weekly gig and you can give them a proper quote and it's actually $50 per week. And again, that adds up over time, $200 a month. And then you do 2 or 3 offices and you're making $600 a month. And actually that's pretty good for side freelance income.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. So we've learned about how to acquire new skills. You spoke about front-loading learning, committing to a small amount. We've learned about how you can learn and how you can grow, which is by interviewing people who've already been there and done that and really committing to that. Maybe creating a platform like a blog. You talked to us about how to learn Mandarin and then money, and I loved it. How to be ruthless. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we've missed out on that you had in your notes and you
let
were
me
very passionate about?
I know I've got like 5 pages of notes here and I haven't been checking them off as we go. So okay, we talked about this. We talked about that, about becoming a lawyer. Okay, more about becoming a lawyer. I think this is really important. Like you said, a lot of people involved with the Model UN, et cetera, they have this idea that there'll be lawyers, politicians, et cetera, in the future, which is great. But, okay, don't become a lawyer because you think you're going to make a lot of money, right? I listen to that over and over and over and over again because it's not easy money. You're going to work much harder to be a successful lawyer than you would to be a successful house cleaning business or the office cleaning thing that I just said. Because a lot of school, a lot of debt, okay, maybe your parents are paying for it and you don't have that problem. But I took on debt to go to law school. I finished. I, paid my way through, etc. And then becoming a lawyer, you're entering a saturated market. You're entering a market where there's a lot of really smart people. It's hard. So don't do it for the money. Do it because being a lawyer is like something that you'd just intrinsic value or you see as a prerequisite for becoming something else. Like you really want to become a judge or whatever. I don't know. But don't do it for the money. Okay,
that's important. And I think it applies to many other things, right? A lot of people want to be politicians. They feel that they want to do it for the power or for the money. And I think the message behind that is figure out what you think that politicians have a lot of power, that lawyers have a lot of money. Okay, go talk to them and figure out, is that actually true? If it's true, what does it take to get to that level? And then is that something that you want for yourself? Right? That's something we can use to apply to many different areas.
Totally.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us. I'm sure we've learned a lot, and I'll send you, of course, the link. If they want to connect with you, they want to learn more about you, where can we direct them to?
Yeah, michaelalexis.com if they want to sign up for the emails. And if they want to skip that, michaelalexis.com/welcome.
Okay, so michaelalexis.com, I'll make sure to link to that. Michael, thank you so much again for doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And all the best with building your business now.
Thank you.